I would like to call the school board meeting for Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019 for the Des Moines Public Schools to order. Please take the roll.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Barron?
Here.
Ms. Bradley? Ms. Caldwell-Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Cody?
Here.
Ms. Delagardelle?
Here.
Ms. Sawyer?
Oops, here.
The first item of business is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion by Caldwell-Johnson and a second by Anderson. Please vote.
Did we change? Can I do a redo? I'm sorry. Tom, were you going to?
It's pulled.
It's pulled? Okay.
Yeah.
Did I not print off the agenda? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm ready, sorry.
Okay. Okay. The vote is approved 7-0. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes for our last meeting on Tuesday, November 19th. Thank you. I didn't fill that date in. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Barron and a second by Caldwell-Johnson. Please vote. So Kelly and Kaylin, you should actually abstain, I believe, right? Is that correct?
Because we weren't here.
Right. Perfect. Okay. We have a vote of 5-0 with 2 abstentions. We have no district recognitions this evening, so the next item on the agenda is our consent items. We allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for up to 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, please go to the information desk to sign up. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid reference to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. We appreciate your input. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with a speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determinations as deemed necessary. Ms. Bradley, do you have the motion?
Yes, I do. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $6,007,620.51.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Bradley and a second by Caldwell-Johnson. Any discussion? Please vote. The consent items are approved 7-0. All right, next, I want to make sure I've got these in the right order. Next, we have a public hearing. The public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E1, public hearing for FCS upgrade at Lincoln High School and FCS science upgrade at Roosevelt High School? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
I recommend the board review the proposed plans and specifications prepared by Studio Melee for Family and Consumer Science upgrade at Lincoln High School and Family and Consumer Science and Science Room upgrade at Roosevelt High School, hold a public hearing, and approve the plans.
May I please have a motion and a second to approve the public hearing and superintendent's recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Caldwell-Johnson and a second by Ms. Bradley. Any questions or discussion? Please vote. The vote is approved 7-0. Next, we have a public hearing. The public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E2, public hearing for addition of 3 internal classrooms and upgrades to the small gym at Lincoln High School? Do we have a speaker for this one? No, okay. Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
I recommend the board review the proposed plans and specifications prepared by FRK Architects for the addition of 3 classrooms internally and upgrades to the small gym at Lincoln High School, hold a public hearing, and approve the plans.
May I please have a motion and a second to approve the public hearing and superintendent's recommendation?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Mr. Barron and a second by Ms. Caldwell Johnson. Any questions or discussion? Please vote. The vote is approved 7-0. Next, we have a public hearing. The public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E3, public hearing for ADA renovation to the nurse's office and lift to lower level at Harding Middle School? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
I recommend the board review the proposed plans and specifications prepared by Studio Melee for ADA renovation of the nurse's office and HC lift installation to lower level at Harding Middle School, hold a public hearing, and approve the plans.
May I please have a motion and a second to approve the public hearing and superintendent's recommendations?
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Barron and a second by Ms. Bradley. Any questions or discussion? Please vote. The vote is approved 7-0. Next, we have a public hearing. The public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E4, public hearing for auditorium upgrades at Callanan Middle School? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
I recommend the board review the proposed plans and specifications prepared by Angelo Architectural Associates for upgrades to the auditorium at Callanan Middle School, hold a public hearing, and approve the plans.
May I please have a motion and second to approve the public hearing and the superintendent's recommendation?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Caldwell Johnson and a second by Ms. Anderson. Any questions or discussion? Please vote. The vote is approved 7-0. Next, we have a public hearing. The public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E5, public hearing for Lincoln High School wrestling room renovation at Kurtz? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
I recommend the board review the proposed plans and specifications prepared by FRK Architects for Lincoln High School's wrestling room renovation at Kurtz, hold a public hearing, and approve the plans.
May I please have a motion and second to approve the public hearing and superintendent's recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Anderson and a second by Ms. Bradley. Any questions or discussion? Please vote. The vote is approved 7-0. Next, we have a public hearing. The public hearing will come to order. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item E6, public hearing for B8456 Walnut Street chiller replacement? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
I recommend the board review the proposed plans and specifications prepared by KCL Engineering for the Walnut Street chiller replacement, hold a public hearing, and approve the plans.
May I please have a motion and second to approve the public hearing and the superintendent's recommendation?
I move approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Barron and a second by Mr. Cody. Any questions or discussion? Please vote. The vote is approved 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item F1, our Black Male Third Grade Reading Smart Goal Monitoring Report, Part 1. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Ahart for presentation of the item.
Yes, good evening, board. One note, and we received a message from me this afternoon or this morning, I'm not sure what time it was sent, after touching base with AJ Craybill. In the past, when we had multiple monitoring reports on a specific topic, our practice has been to not have the board act on each of those reports until the final report at the end of the year. After a conversation with AJ to clarify, we think best practice is actually for the board to take action on each of the reports. So you will be receiving 4 reports on this SMART goal as well as the other SMART goals, and we will be asking for action on each of those. That's something certainly we can talk about further if the board desires, but that's why the agenda item was changed from a discussion item to a discussion and action item. So we're now launching a new, really sort of a new a new chapter in the work of the board as it relates to student achievement, and I want to congratulate the board on that. So after many years of discussing this and analyzing data and getting higher and tighter on governance, we're now in a place where we have very specific goals in place, multi-year goals, specific to the points in our system where we think we can leverage the most system improvement. And the first is black male third grade reading. With me tonight are our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Noelle Nelson, and our Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning, Kelly Schofield. And we will be, this report will be a bit different in two ways. Number one, we're going to give a little bit more background information than probably will be necessary as we move forward, as we talk in a little more depth about the FAST assessment and why we use that and what that means and what it measures. And since we don't really have progress per se to share, since this is the first report of the year, we'll be talking about what this baseline data tells us and what that means as we look at monitoring progress for the first year of the SMART goal. So with that, we can dig into the actual report.
Right, so we did want to start with a little bit of background to let you know what this assessment and this report, where the data is being pulled from and what those assessments really tell us. So the assessments that we take for early literacy all assess the components of foundational skills, which you're seeing there. There's the five components, and those are the components that we work on when we're building the instructional piece in the classroom, and then the assessments that we take address those particular, all five of those components. The assessment, the FAST assessment, is a universal screener. Right? So it's evidence-based, valid, and reliable. It's required by the Iowa Department of Education that we have a screener that is evidence-based, valid, and reliable. It's administered to all K-3 students 3 times a year. So we do fall, winter, spring. Each time we administer it, the target increases. So many tests you take would be, you would be always looking at an end of the year target, but these targets increase each time. So what they're expected to do in the fall is different than in the winter and the spring. So each of the subtests that the students take will increase throughout the year. It's used to identify students for being at risk for not being ready for reading by 3rd grade. So that's the difference when we don't say proficiency, because it's really an at-risk screener. It casts a wide net, and it enables us to be able to address needs quickly. Based on those screening results, we can apply different interventions, more diagnostics as needed, and progress monitoring for students. These are, this chart gives you the actual FAST assessments on the right side that are administered at different grade levels, and it ties it to the component, the essential component for reading. So you're able to see which of the sub-assessments are assessing which area of the essential components of reading. Back to our board goal, and I'm just going to read it aloud because every time I do, it just makes me realize the work we have in front of us. So the percent of black male 3rd grade students on track in reading will increase from 35% to 72% by June 2023 as measured by FAST. This slide is telling us that we can make that goal and exceed that goal because based on research, 95% of elementary students can reach that goal, can do what we're asking them to do. Right? 30% of the students with minimal instruction, they can learn to read in any classroom environment, basically. Another 50% will learn to read with quality tier instruction. So there's 80% right there. 15% will need additional time, so that's where interventions may happen, special education supports, specially designed instruction, and then 5% are going to struggle, right, based on cognitive impairments or other reasons they're going to struggle to learn to read. And now I'm going to share with you some of our Des Moines data that we are working to address. So right now we have about 1,100 of our K-3 students have an IEP, which means they're getting specially designed instruction. That's 14%. And those IEPs are not necessarily just reading. Okay, they could be math, they could be speech, they could be behavior. But just to give you an idea, that's about how many students right now have specially designed instruction. Of those 1,100 students, 853 of them are not meeting the reading benchmarks. 151 of our Black male students have an IEP, and 126 of those are not meeting benchmarks. So 83% of our Black males that also are receiving specially designed instruction are not meeting our reading benchmarks. 563 of our Black males are not meeting benchmark. Based on our panorama survey that we just gave for SEL, on average, about 44% of our teachers feel they do not have the skills necessary to address unique learning needs. And we currently have more than 60% of our K-3 students in a tiered intervention. So these are some of the things that we are working to address.
So did you say the 44% do or do not have the skills?
Sorry, 44% feel they have the skills.
Oh,
Sorry.
do not. Oh, have.
So that's meaning that,
And this is teachers self-reporting?
self-reporting, correct.
Right.
And that would be K-12 teachers,
Right.
not just K-3 teachers there, but we put that number in there just to say that we've got work to do to be sure that our teachers, this is not to point fingers at the teachers, but really for us to know that we have work to do to prepare our teachers to do the work that's ahead of us as well and give them what they need.
So one of the major changes as a result of the board setting these priority goals is that we've wanted to think about how might we display our progress toward these goals, knowing that these are multi-year goals, but the only way we'll know if we're on track to meet our goal is to establish those incremental targets. So 3 times a year, we've established targets that will either put us on track or not on track, so that when we report out to you all and internally to ourselves, from the school board all the way down to schools, we can have that very clear-cut discussion on, are we on track? And if we're not, why? And what are we doing about it? So Mary's team has worked really, really hard in collaboration with us and the board to display or to create and display a public-facing dashboard. So historically, for those of you who have been on the board, you're well aware, but for those of you who are new, we would often submit a 15 to 20-page report that was full of charts and graphs. It was very difficult to make meaning from that. It was like information overload. And so our goal is to simplify, to provide you all a dashboard, and not just for the board, but for all of our constituents to, at any point in time, see throughout the year, are we on track? And so we included a link in your report, but I am going to take a minute to pull that up so that you have an opportunity to see what's there, and so that our community members have an opportunity to see what's there. Currently, the link for this, it is embedded in the report. It's also included in the board docs. There's a library section and then a board goals section. We're actually going to take it one step further, and on our main website under the school board, we're going to ask Phil's team to actually create a link. That just hasn't been done yet, but it will shortly. So I'm going to show you how that might look for you all. And I know it's difficult to see in this view. I'm hoping it switches over here. Of course, there's no signal. There you go. Are we in?
We did come early and test it.
No, there's no signal.
There we go. Well, okay. Well, I'm not sure how to.
I think we have a wire here that might have a short in it.
to demo this. Essentially, when you pull up the dashboard, we have reported historically both percentages and number of students. So when you hover over any percentage that exists on this dashboard, it will also give you a breakdown of the number of students that are in that data set. Almost. So across the bottom, you'll see our actual trend line for data starting in the 2016-17 school year. And you can see at the various points of time throughout the year where we stand with actual data. More importantly, starting from the fall moving forward, you'll see targets that have been set. So you can contrast the target with our actual data to see how close are we to meeting target, are we exceeding target, are we not meeting target. So that's what our discussions can be grounded in, is how close are we to meeting target. So we have the overall breakdown of third grade Black males, since that's the goal area, but then below that we also have kindergarten, first, and second grade, so that you can see as we get more granular what that data looks like by grade level. And I can't wait for you to see this dashboard. We'll have to revisit this another time when the technology is working. But keep in mind, you do have the live link that you should be able to access at any point in time.
I was going to say, board members, I just pulled it up from the report, and it's working. I mean, we can't project it, but it's there, it's working. So.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Tim. So as I was saying before, you can see this is the third grade goal. You can see the actual data over the three various points in time over the past 3 years. And then starting in the fall of 2019, you can see where we've established our targets. When you hover over any of those, you can get the actual N to see how many students are included in that data set. The very bottom, after you see the individual grade breakdown, the very bottom is anytime a student in that screening period is not on track, they become part of the at-risk category, and then they automatically qualify for more intensive intervention as well as progress monitoring. So this bottom section, one of our progress measures is what % of students are actually being progress monitored on a grade level expectation throughout the year. So right now we've got some actual work to do even on tightening up that system so that we can get reliable data for progress monitoring for ourselves and you. But our goal would be 100% of students are being progress monitored who need to be. And right now we're sitting at about 62% in first grade, 92% in second grade, and about 95% in third grade. So we're close. We have got some work to do in first grade. So I wanted to make you aware of this dashboard. So rather than receiving all of these charts and graphs, this is the data set that will be available to you at any point in time.
And I just wanted to say with the progress monitoring on grade level, the recommendation is, like on first grade, you're seeing that progress monitoring percentage to be lower. We're pulling it for progress monitoring for the CBM, for fluency, but many teachers now are progress monitoring on nonsense words or letter sounds because that's the deficit skill of the student. So when we say we got work to do is just to talk about how we need to progress monitor on both of those because the CBM is a more robust measure. So we need to be able to have them progress monitor on that regularly also. So they are progress monitoring at a higher rate than the 62%, but just not on the CBM reading that we are recommending.
Mm-hmm. So being that this is technically baseline data, being that these goals are new, we do want to give you kind of a historical look over the past 3 years of where we've been. So in the executive summary, we've lifted up some data points and kind of done the math, where if we look at just the progress measure, which is third grade reading, if we look at that over a 3-year period, our % of Black males starting their third grade year on track is up about 5.6% when we compare it to where different kids were in the fall of 2017. So looking at that trend, we are up a little bit. Our goals moving forward are more robust, so we'll need to certainly pick up the pace of growth to be on track. When we look at how that breaks down for K2 students, kindergarten, we have a pretty nice increase over a 3-year period of time historically. So when we look at them entering school, so this is actually more of a reflection of any pre-K that they've had, we're at close to 12% increase from 3 years ago to the fall of, fall of 2017 to the fall of 2019. First grade is pretty much flat. We haven't seen a lot of significant gains. It's a slight dip, but we would say it's pretty stagnant over that period of time. And so we know that there's certainly more work to be done. And second grade continues to be an issue for us. We've actually seen a decrease over that period of time of about 9%. So that's certainly a red flag for us and alarming. When we look at the actual achievement gap, this report was on Black males, but I think it's important to look at it in the context of how they compare to all students. There is some good news there when we look at that trend over time from fall of 2017 to 2019. We are shrinking the achievement gap in kindergarten, first grade, and third grade, but then increasing that gap in second grade. So it points to some issues that we're seeing in first grade, likely, as those students are being tested in the fall of second grade. When we look at where we've been and currently where we stand in regard to when a student is red flagged, what does that progress monitoring look like, or are they being progress monitored as a result of some intervention that's happening? The percent of Black males currently being progress monitored on that grade level reading expectation is at 62% for first grade, 91% for second grade, and about 94% for third grade. So that points to that second tier of that dashboard that we're monitoring. Are kids even getting progress monitored, so that we can then answer the question, are they making progress? That's a large system to get implemented in a district our size. So of course the goal is that 100% of students who need to be progress monitored are being progress monitored. Once we can accomplish that, then we can get to that next layer of, are they actually making the progress that we need them to make? Beyond, more frequently than just that 3 times a year that we'll be reporting out.
Kelly, for the non-educators in the room, could you explain what CBM means?
Oh, yeah. Well, a CBM is a curriculum-based measure, so technically all of these assessments are CBMs. FastBridge uses CBM-R, which means CBM reading. So when you hear us say CBM in Des Moines or in Iowa, where we're using this, it means the fluency test. So it's a passage that they read in a minute, and the test would assess their speed and their accuracy. So they're scored for both of those. So that's what CBM would be.
And one of the misconceptions that we always want to clear up is we often get the question of, why does the state use fluency as their measure to determine whether or not a student is on grade level or on track? Because we care more about comprehension, obviously. But one of the things that we want to clear up is that the reason fluency is used, fluency and accuracy, is because those have been proven to be good predictors of reading success. So it's not to say that our goal is fast readers, but if you are a fluent reader, it is more likely that you are a on grade level reader than if you're not. So that is why we look at that measure. But that's an important, I think, point of distinction.
Yeah, the fluency is a huge indicator of comprehension, especially as you move from learning how to read into reading to learn. So if you don't have that fluency where you're connecting the text in a short enough span of time so that your brain can actually connect those ideas, then you just can't ever get to that comprehension level, even if your accuracy is there.
Right. So we do want to make the board aware of some of the things that are currently underway to support this goal, and Kelly's going to talk more specifically about this. But please know that I'm sure you're all aware of the work that's being done right now with our community problem-solving groups and bringing multiple perspectives to the table to try to get to some root cause analysis. So these actions will very likely be impacted by the results of those problem-solving groups. But right now we have to do something. We can't wait idly. So Kelly.
And some of these actions are ones that we've had ongoing, but we are really working this year to continue our learning and understanding of how students learn to read, so that's science behind reading, getting that PD out to building leaders, to coaches, to teachers. We tightened up our foundational skill guidance around those 5 big areas of reading, so really making that tighter in the school, helping them pace that out, staying on grade level so that students are getting that grade level instruction as well as backfilling. We also are really trying to, as we were talking about, fluency isn't the end game, comprehension is always the end game, but we are trying to then connect this foundational skill work more closely to that overall literacy, that reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Right? So being able to decode and encode, talking about rich and complex text will help build our vocabulary, which will in turn help us be more fluent, right? So, and we have adopted some high quality curriculum materials for both our foundational skill block and for our content block that help us do those things, so teachers can spend more time on their craft and the teacher moves than pulling the materials together. Another huge push that we've had last year, but really into this year, we're starting to see progress is access to grade level for all students. So less students being pulled out of the core for additional support or intervention and missing that core instruction. So finding ways to have those students in the classroom and scaffold that grade level learning so that everybody's getting access to grade level. And that we have seen a big shift, and so now it's really working with supporting those teachers that are in the room to scaffold for those students. And then data to action. So we've gotten better at looking at the data and seeing like what is it telling us, but supporting schools in now what? Now what do we do? Because you saw on the slide before, we have a lot of students in intervention, but our data is showing that we need to enhance our core. So being able to talk them through and giving them suggestions on things to do in response to our data. We support 12 schools intensively, which means we have a early lit support person that's on the early lit team in those schools weekly. They're observing not just their foundational block, because we're realizing that we also need to see how that's connected to their other literacy throughout the day. So, so we're observing in those literacy classrooms, giving them feedback and supporting them more intensely in their PLCs around data and their leadership teams, and providing them some additional professional development.
Questions, discussion?
I think we actually might need a motion before we can move to discussion. May I have a motion and a second to approve, I think this is item F1.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion by Barron and a second by Anderson. Is there any discussion or questions?
I do.
Ms. Anderson?
Yep. Let's see, just have a few. Let's see. First one, are the teachers still benchmarking at all? Do they use benchmarking?
Not for this FAST test, the benchmarking. Some teachers are benchmarking for their reading level, but that isn't necessarily we're not using that to determine reading readiness.
Oh yeah, no, I know it's not FAST, but I just wondered in the classroom for the year, I mean, do they get a baseline at all? You don't use that as baseline at all, the benchmarking?
Not across the district, no. But some schools are doing that, but that's not something we're doing across the district.
Okay, and what is, when you said high quality curriculum materials, can you give an example?
Yeah, so we are using EL education curriculum in our K-5 classrooms for the literacy block, for what we're calling content block, and it is focused around complex text, but also content area of science and social studies to build background knowledge. So that's the, it also includes some social emotional learning with it, and it has a stream of social justice that runs through it. So there's a lot of discussion and text and work in the lesson that the students are doing that can connect to them. So that's builds their background knowledge and really gets them engaged. And then in our foundational block, we also have the EL skills materials that the teachers can use, which is the comprehensive program, which includes all the 5 components of the foundational block. Other schools that are trained in OG we have a guidance document that we've put together for them.
Can you talk about Orton Gillingham?
Orton Gillingham, sorry.
Yeah.
Orton Gillingham.
Or OG.
Phonics methodology, OG. They are, we have put together a guidance document and supported schools in how to pace that better, because it is an intervention, so getting it paced so that students are getting the grade level in addition to the backfill, but also how to add the phonemic awareness, which is so important in our K-1, so making sure that we have that intentionally in there, and then the practice with the decodable readers and for fluency. So we've tightened that guidance up as well. So those would be what we use for our materials.
Is the EL, is that a new program this year?
Yes.
And did the teachers receive training on that?
Yes.
All of the teachers?
Yes.
Like,
Our
what does the training look like?
Our 12 schools that we are working with intensively, they received 2 days of training around that EL foundational piece before school started. But we did a summer training for all teachers. We've trained coaches. We have ongoing coach training. We offer, we train our PLC leads to go back. We've done some video training. We've had some Zoom trainings with EL. We have optional things that teachers can come to. So we've tried to support all teachers.
Let's see. I think that's good. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Cody?
Yeah. So you said it was a content block and a foundation block?
We call it the EL content block because it integrates like science and social studies into the topics and the themes that they use. And then we have a foundational block separate than that. So the guidance is they have an hour in K3 for foundational skills work, the sort of discrete skills, and then an hour for what we're called the literacy block, where they're doing a lot more of the work with the complex texts and reading, writing, and speaking and listening.
And does that take the place of science and social studies then?
No, it doesn't take the place of science and social studies. We work to align where it does align. We have a document for the teachers that shows the alignment to our science and social studies. It doesn't align perfectly, so there is another science and social studies block as well in the day. When it aligns, it's nice because they can use both of those blocks kind of to build that understanding, but they still teach they still have a block to teach science and social studies.
Yeah, so, for example, one of the units is on like civil rights. So kids are reading, writing, speaking, and listening around a theme, so they can immerse themselves in this topic, build background knowledge, build vocabulary, which we know aids in reading. So that's the advantage of having a cohesive curriculum where teachers aren't having to go find all of these resources that we know are guaranteed grade level.
So yeah, then my next question was about the PD. You talked about how you're spending a lot of time on the foundations and the science of and this and that. Plus you spent a bunch of time introducing a new curriculum, plus you're doing constant trainings on that. When is there time for the other subjects?
Right now, the board goal is our priority.
Last I checked, math was one of those too.
Mm-hmm. It is, and so you're absolutely right. So what we're doing, we've prioritized this year of really getting some foundational things in place for the literacy, knowing that there's no way our teachers can do all of 2 new curriculums for literacy and math all at the same time. So our plan is, let's get this in place, let's get our teachers trained up, let's get them comfortable with this, and then add another layer. So it's not to say that there's nothing happening, certainly there is, but knowing that this is a really heavy lift, anytime you roll out a new curriculum, it's a lot for our teachers. So that is being prioritized right now, knowing that certainly we have additional layers to add as we move forward.
And we have been going into grade levels to sort of lay some foundational work in math and number sense routines and some different PD that they can take into their classroom as we're looking to then go into a new curriculum for math, and then also showing them how to use their math curriculum they have now more effectively. So we have done some of those things as well.
It's just not as intensive as the literacy right now.
And what is the math one currently?
We have Go Math is the current adopted curriculum. Mm-hmm.
Well, I just have one more quick one. So back to that dashboard, I mean, there is no cohort data yet because it's new data, but is it possible that that could be built in so we could just easily find it instead of doing the diagonals and everything?
It was set up as trend, but I'm sure, if that's something that the board all agrees that that's important information. The third grade goal, I believe, Mary, you're in the group. It was too cluttered, but we can certainly add it back.
Add a link or something. I'd like to look at it anyway.
Absolutely. And really, just to remind everyone, the third grade goal is based on this year's kindergartners. So that is something we are looking at cohort over time.
Right. And I know cohort data is something that we've discussed at the board table over the last couple of years. 'Cause
Absolutely.
it can sometimes be the truest measure of the impact we're having on kids. So yeah, we can talk about that as a board if that's something we think we need before our next monitoring.
And our
report.
biggest thing is we just want this to be easily consumable by people. You don't have to have a PhD in stats to understand the dashboards. And so perhaps we can work more closely with the board to, what makes sense.
Yeah.
Right, because the public facing, if it.
Right, it's public facing, so we don't want to overwhelm
Data,
anyone.
can we get the board as well?
Kaylin, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I did. This one also should be brief. On one of the early slides, there was a couple of mentions to A reading. What's A reading?
A reading is another assessment under the Fast Bridge suite that measures comprehension. So, but we use MAP to do that in the district right now. Some schools use A reading as well. That's a choice they have. It's in the suite of tests that we have license for. But we use, so it would be more of a comprehension measure. We use MAP for that, for second and third grade.
Anyone else? Yeah, Ms. Sawyer.
So a quick question that I had, in the slide response to data, you had mentioned that these are things that have been ongoing in the district. And so my question being, as you set this goal, what changed? Like, you have to be able to show that you're doing things differently in order to get different results.
Absolutely.
So what's really changed?
From the response?
Well, you have the response to data, and you had said that
some of these things have been ongoing.
Already been
I would say
ongoing,
ongoing and enhanced and changed. We have been working on that foundational skills block for about 3 years, but every year, so the change for this school year we're in now is tightening it up, the guidance on that, working with teachers to be sure that all students are getting grade level phonics instruction or phonemic awareness instruction each day in some way for a certain amount of minutes, and we're not always behind. So we have been sometimes teaching to, if we have a large group of students, say 60% of our students are off grade level, we start off grade level and we teach off grade level, or we could have. So we've really worked on, yes, we need to backfill those skills and teach in small group or to the whole class to backfill skill, but they also every day need the grade level skill. So that would be a change for this year, that we've really worked on that and really worked with schools on enhancing that foundational block. Also, we've really worked with them on the connected text during that foundational block, so having those decodable readers or decodable text that they're reading to practice those skills. So that would be an enhancement that we've made. The curriculum materials are new this year, and then that push for all students to be in, that's definitely it was a very strong push for this starting this school year that students were in, and that was in collaboration with our EL department and our special education department. So we're all working together to have those students be in the classroom and having scaffolds.
Because essentially what was happening is students would be pulled out to receive intervention, but then they never actually got their grade level. So how do you close a gap when you're never getting your grade level?
And because of scheduling, some of those students may miss the first 5 minutes of a lesson, or 10 minutes, or the middle 10 minutes, or the end of 10 minutes. So our most struggling students were having the most disconnected experience. So we really worked with our special education department and our ELL department and those teachers together to get those students in the classroom so that they would have the opportunity to have that in grade level instruction.
Do we know what percentage of the kids in this that you've identified are non-English speaking?
Yeah, we actually brought that with us. If we look at in K-3 alone, the 9% of our K-3 students are Black males. Of that 9%, 26.5% of the Black males are also ELL. So language is a whole nother issue that we know is being addressed now more comprehensively. Before it kind of lived in ELL, and now it's like, this is everybody's job. And so that is also supported in our new curriculum. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Bradley?
What is the curriculum, the literacy curriculum that we're using right now?
It's EL curriculum.
Okay, and you said that's new this year?
Yes.
So when we're talking about 44% of the teachers feel that they have the skills to address the needs, is some of the problem that we're seeing is because we have a new curriculum, are teachers feeling comfortable with that curriculum since it's new? Have we gotten a response on how they're feeling with that?
We are working with that and kind of talking with teacher groups. We have several different groups that we pull and meet with. Some of it is the new curriculum. They're feeling much better about it now. It's a big lift. It's sort of a curriculum that has PD along with it. So there's a lot of reading about how do we scaffold, how do we make sure our English language learners are, what are some strategies that we can use for them. So there's a lot. It's not the same as a basal reader that we would think about, where we could come in and open the page and just teach from the book, right? You really have to read it and digest it. So I think that that is helping. Also, that push, when we're pushing students in, and most of our teachers are agreeing that's the right thing to do. They need to be in there. But now they're in here, how can you help me help them? Right? So I'm not a trained ELL teacher, or I'm not a trained special education teacher. What strategies can you give me? So I think that's an area that we're really working on, and working with our EL department, our special education department, to not only support those teachers, those special area teachers, but also our general education teachers. So I think that comes into play. I also think, so when that question came up about unique needs, it's learning needs, but it's also behavior needs. So helping them with those behavior needs in the classroom, routines, conditions that will support all learners.
And then what is so students that are getting the extra help, what does that look like for a student in a typical day? Are they, besides meeting with the teacher, they're meeting with an interventionist, I'm assuming? Is there anyone else that they're meeting with throughout that day if we're giving them some type of intense work?
It could be. We're really trying to work with that data. So it could be working with the teacher on the grade level, and then maybe the whole class is getting, or most of the class is getting, another enhancement to that whole group or a whole class. It could be small group with the teacher. Also the interventionists, ELL teachers, and they still do get specially designed instruction. It might, sometimes that is pulled out to do, but we're just trying not to make that during the core instructional time. But sometimes that's pushed in, so integrated in. So those teachers come in and they help deliver that in the classroom. So that's another way that would be happening. So you might see a student that is while everybody's doing their independent work or doing their guided practice, they're working with a special education teacher or an ELL teacher to sort of support that learning or backfill skills.
And then for our schools that need interventionists, do all of those schools have interventionists? Do we need more interventionists? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, any school with Title I funds typically have interventionists. Mm-hmm. I think just across the country, we have fallen into the intervention trap, and it's a very expensive trap where we try to live in remediation. And so what we're trying to do is flip the script to say, we should be able to address 80% of our students' needs with a healthy core instruction, which is where our resources and supports are going. You're always going to have kids who need more, of course, but it shouldn't be 80% of our students who need more. It should be 20% or less. So right now, until we flip that, we don't believe that the best course of action is to invest in more intervention. Our best course of action is to get them early in K1 and 2 so that we reduce the need for intervention. Special ed is very expensive, as we know. Title is very expensive, as we know.
And many of the interventionists that the schools have, is they all do have them, they're using them more to come into the classroom so that they can address, in the K1 especially, so that there's 2 people in there, so they're doing more
Proactively.
co-teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
So I just had a couple of quick questions. This was helpful. What would be even more helpful, though, is maybe just having a sheet that tells us the demographics of the K3 students, black male students. In other words, sort of this is the composite look at who our K3 black males are. Because you've pulled out some key pieces here, but I'm having a hard time sort of doing the math to get back to what the totals look like. So I think that would be helpful, and I don't know moving forward if we may want to do that for all of the monitoring reports where we're talking about a specific subpopulation. So anyway, that would be very helpful for me. The other comment that I wanted to make, and this I think really goes to the action we're being asked to take tonight, and I always struggle with this, and I think it's something that we'll struggle with for a while, but how are we defining compliance? What's the prerequisite for compliance? Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that. And I struggle with, since this is the first time we're doing this, I think it's certainly a topic that we need to wrestle with a little bit so that we're clear about what it means and we're not sending mixed messages if we get to a point down the road where we're saying it's non-compliant, but we haven't defined what that is. So I just put that back on us as a place where we need to focus our attention so that there's clarity around this table that translates to clarity with the staff.
Yeah, I have a couple questions about the report, and then should we circle back and have a conversation about that? Does anyone else have any other questions before Mr. Barron?
Well, I want to get back to the dashboard because I do think it's well designed. I appreciate the way it's laid out. I think the less is more on this, and I think one of the traps I've seen us kind of fall into the last 6 years is looking for more information and loading up these reports with, and you all, always responding to what we're asking for and then adding more and more. And I think the more that we can keep it concise, the better, not just for us, but for folks who are keeping track of this. And I think it makes our job easier too. Then, we're better able to make assessments as to whether we're meeting our goal or not. I did appreciate, in terms of presentation, choosing to talk about and share the number of students with IEPs that are in this population. It's not a aspect of this work that we regularly hear about, and that this board doesn't necessarily always ask about. So I appreciate that, and I expect, as we move forward on this, that there will be different things you'll want to highlight at different times that we're making this report. And I would hope that you would do that because there's a lot to share. And it's fair for us to look at different aspects of it at a time. I got Tom's email about having this be an action item tonight as opposed to a discussion item. And I have the same kind of sense of unease that Terry does, and in that this is the first time that we've had a goal here, and I would expect you all probably have a sense of unease too as to how or what we're going to do. But relative to what we're asking you to do and the information you're asking us to do, and the response that you're making towards what the board has set out for a goal, to me this is compliance. Now, looking back historically, I would have some challenge in saying that we are fully compliant with an expectation that all our students demonstrate proficiency and understanding of a rigorous core curriculum when we're, a majority are not reading at third grade level. And I think that's why we set the goal, and that's what we're all working towards. So I think that the way I look at it is, I think that the board has to have a clear understanding of what it means to be compliant. But I also think that we have to be clear and open to the fact that that standard might change as we get deeper into monitoring this particular goal and the other goals as well. Because right now, I think you all are doing what we'd asked. You're laying the foundation for what we need to understand this. But eventually, the judgment is to, how our students are performing, and that that bar only goes up as we get deeper into this process.
Okay, I just have a couple questions. I'm going to take us back and then bring us back to this compliance question. One of the things you'd mentioned was a slide prior to second grade, right? And as a librarian, teachers, we refer to this as the summer slide, right? We have kids that lose that gap every year. So what preparations are being made to help support our students first into second grade for this next year, so that we aren't sitting here at this time next year and saying, oh, our second graders slid backwards again?
Well, and I actually don't want to attribute this to summer slide. I
Okay.
think we have a first grade problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
A year long.
Okay.
Not to point, the
Right.
expectation changes dramatically. So what a student is expected to do in first grade is dramatic. So
Okay.
again, I'm not calling out first grade as the problem. I'm just saying we need a lot of support for our schools in that, because it's not just a summer issue.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So is that a contributing, do we think that that's a contributing factor? I'm just kind of curious, how are our kids supported, in that transition year to year, and that gap
In the
that we have
summer?
over the summer? Yeah.
We are looking at some things and working with different groups and community groups, and working with Allison Vukovic to set some things up in places that are already set for this coming year, and how can we then front load or review or preview the topics and curriculum and the skills that we have with students.
So one of the things that we haven't capitalized on, and that's an advantage of a board goal, is we now have community members who are coming to us and say, we want to be part of this. We want to be part of the solution. And so now it was the perfect opportunity to sit down with the community partners who are already offering summer schools. Our kids are in our schools getting served. So we are actually now going to provide them the curriculum and the support to the teachers who are delivering that, versus asking these community groups to independently go out and design that, because that's actually not their niche. That's our niche. But they're going to provide the resources and the people and the transportation and all of those really logistical things that are hard for us to pull off. So that's the power, I think, an example of the power of a board goal. People have come out of the woodwork.
That's awesome. That's exciting.
And then second part of that was we're really focusing in on first grade right now from January till the end, and supporting admin, coaches, and teachers on some building up some routines that they could do in their classroom that will help them get closer to that first grade goal. So we need to, many times, they haven't mastered it. Our data may look decent at the end of first grade, but it slides back because they really didn't master those skills. So
It's kind of like a slippery grasp, and then we hit a summer. And,
So really, really working on them mastering those skills by the end of first grade, so we can feel confident that those numbers we get, they're going to keep or stay there,
Okay.
Yeah, and that summer slide is real. And one of the things you'll note in the calendar that you've already approved for next year, you'll see the year go creep a little bit later into June. And we intend to look for ways that we can continue to kind of stretch that year a bit, so we have less of a large gap. We do have, something that I don't know where we're going to end up with this, but we cannot do year-round school district-wide by state code, because high schools cannot be on a year-round calendar. So, that may be a question that we talk about at the board, because as most of you know, the state, actually it's nationwide too, but the length of the school year is the same as it has been for many decades. And we know that that's not enough time for a lot of our students who enter school with some significant gaps. And so looking for ways that we can access those students, having the community partners is wonderful, and people are coming out of the woodwork. I think we're going to get a lot of mileage out of that, but we also really can't compel attendance for those who are not of a mind to take advantage of those services after the standard school year is complete. So we have some larger issues that we're trying to creatively address as well.
And I know we don't look at, building level data at the board table, or historically we have not, but we do have a year-round school that I'm sure for your curiosity you're probably gonna dig into those numbers and see how does that compare to, and seeing if there's any correlation there. But one of the questions I'd also had was around culturally responsive or culturally sensitive curriculum materials, and it does sound like there's some social justice themes weaved into that. Do those texts, are they written by curriculum writers? Do they bring in literature? Like, what's the nonfiction fiction balance? Okay.
And it definitely is culturally representative.
Okay.
Right? It's one of the reasons why we chose it.
Okay.
Yes, so there is fiction and nonfiction, but they are they're text.
Right.
That you would find in the library.
Books.
Trade books.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so they're trade books, so they are fiction and nonfiction. Can you give an approximation? Is it more heavily nonfiction? Is it more heavily fiction? I'm just trying to get I'm not familiar with this curriculum, so I'm just trying to get a sense.
I would
for
say it's
kinda
probably maybe a little heavier on the nonfiction.
Okay.
But lots of opportunities, though, in discussion and in their written work and their projects to connect it to themselves. So, and the community. Okay. So there's a big piece a through line in the curriculum is you're learning things, background knowledge about certain topics, but you're applying them to how can you make the world better, right? And so a lot of it is they were learning all about birds in first grade. Right? But then they moved into how do we take care of habitats in our community so that birds and animals can enhance our community. Okay. So it gets into things like that.
So kind of making it more real world for them. Then.
Yes, but the last fifth grade unit that we just did was Esperanza Rising, which is a fiction book, but they compared it to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from. So that was the nonfiction piece. So they were comparing those things together.
Okay, so the curriculum is pairing high quality fiction texts with strong nonfiction to help kids draw real world connections.
And poems and different things also, other readings that they do, articles and poems.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was figuring when you had mentioned that this was kind of taking the burden off of teachers to gather resources and was allowing them to just utilize their craft to apply to the resources.
Correct, because they're pulling those text sets for them.
Okay.
And there's in the curriculum materials or in the resource materials that you can pull, it gives you a rubric of why they chose the text, and it goes through not just the grade level and the complexity, but the cultural relevance and the relevance to the theme. So you can go through and it'll tell you why that text was chosen for this grade level in this lesson.
And we've talked a little bit about the teachers' familiarity with this, but how are they responding to the actual curriculum? Are they enjoying the text that they're getting to explore with their students, or
more now? Yes.
Okay. Now that they know them
you're getting
a little
through
better.
the moves of it, and it's a lot. On the very the start, it's a lot of setting up routines and protocols as well, because one of the key things in this is those routines and protocols, so that you can teach those early on and you don't have to keep teaching them. And because it's new, if you were in fourth grade, they didn't get those the previous routines and protocols, so they were having to do some backfill for that as well. But yes, they're very especially our third, fourth, and fifth are very pleased with the content and the discussions that the students are having, because it gives them questions that they can ask that lead to the type of discussions that they want. So they have those text-dependent questions in there that are helping the teachers get to the kind of discussion that they want to have with the students.
Okay, I just have one last question, and for my board colleagues, this came from some of the suggested questions from Lori, and I thought this one was particularly interesting to me, but how can the board help you in your work? You're probably not ready for that question, so maybe it doesn't need to be answered tonight.
I have a thought on that. I think we're already seeing some power behind some singular goals and priorities, and I guess as for us, it's sticking to that. And if we say this is important, and we all start to rally around what's most important, that it stays the most important.
Yeah,
and that goes for us too, with our teachers and on across the organization.
Yeah, and I think before the election, I had spoke a lot about that at your community problem-solving meetings, that for me, this came from the community. These goals were what the community set out for us that were the most important, and the power at this board table comes from the community. And so my my intention is to stay laser focused on these because I do think this is the good work because this is what our community said. So I just want to bring the board back to the idea of what is compliance. I'm going to offer that I believe you guys are creating like a benchmark, right? This is kind of like our ground zero for us. For me, we've set out, or our superintendent in tandem with us, we've set out, you know, what our little checkpoints are going to be throughout the year and what we want to be at the end of the year. So I would offer that I think compliance is meeting those expectations of what the goal was set. Mm-hmm. But maybe that doesn't make sense. I don't know.
So I was sitting here thinking about this after I asked the question, and I feel like maybe there's an opportunity to separate the first piece of the work from the following pieces of work that we expect to receive. So if we believe that the framework that they've established here is something that will allow us to monitor progress and to stay on top of the goal that we have set, then the framework to me can be viewed as compliant, which then I think creates an opportunity for us then to talk about what compliance from that point looks like. So it's sort of like separating it in a way that allows us to say, okay, yeah, we like this. This is what we want to use moving forward. And so we're going to check this off as compliant. But then what compliance looks like once we build on this report and get subsequent reports to me is what the next piece of the compliance discussion needs to look like. So that's sort of in my mind how I'm separating it. Does that make sense to you?
So the compliance vote for tonight would look different than what our definition for compliance will be when we get a part two?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we're sort of agreeing that the form and function and data points are the ones that make sense for us, and then we build on it. That's how I'm sort of separating in my simple mind.
Okay.
I think we do need to have a discussion and get clarity, because I very much appreciate that approach, because this, regardless of what's ultimately decided, this report is different from the succeeding reports for sure.
Correct.
There's just no two ways about it. But we've struggled with this for
Way too
quite
long.
some time,
Yeah.
for far too long, and it's crazy making for me and for the team, and I know for you all as well. So I do think we need to invest some time collectively with AJ or the appropriate expertise, so that we do have more clarity about what compliance really means.
Well, and we'll be spending some time with AJ in January, right after the holiday and winter break. And so I think we can probably
It'll be well timed too.
Yeah, we can definitely make sure that we continue that discussion, but I imagine there's probably more clarity we want to get to tonight as well. So, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Barron.
No, it's fine. I wanted to muddy up the clarity a little bit, because I think as we progress further, even into part two, I can't remember will we have the winter fast data by the time you present part two?
Part two,
In January?
January.
In January? I can't.
January would be
No, we
the
have regular reading. We have
regular reading part
comprehensive
one.
third grade reading in January, but then I can't remember the next time we have a.
Yeah, the part two should incorporate the winter data.
Yes, we'll have that by the end of January.
That's why we
So then I think this is for my colleagues, is so perhaps we're meeting our expectation. Perhaps we met the 43.4% goal measure on for the winter fast for third grade, but we didn't make it for any of the other grades, or vice versa. Or we met it, but then we didn't meet it the next time out. And so I think, the conversation needs to, now that we have an explicit profile that we're going to be looking at and working from, a dashboard, then the conversations need to be, I think, a little bit more with real hypotheticals about what will it take, and what's the will of this board to define compliance versus non-compliance. Because, Kayla and I just had a brief conversation. I mean, compliance is not just did they meet the number, but also are they taking reasonable steps to meet that number as well. And so, if the part, let's muddy the waters again. Part 2, we're not meeting the number. Well, is it our perspective that then the steps are no longer the right steps? Well, and there's layers to the onion that we need to start unpacking, with the understanding that we'll start getting part 2 reports in a couple months. And so I just want folks to be reflecting upon what that means to them.
Yeah. I also think that there's a piece of this to me that goes to the longer term view of the goal. Because this is, fairly aggressive, as are all of our goals. And so to me, there's a piece that speaks to compliance at this moment versus how the compliance at this moment builds on our ability to reach the goal. And at what pace and at what cost. So to me, those are sort of the differentiating factors that I think we need to also factor into what compliance looks like, because, we could very well get to 2022 and not be moving at the pace that we had hoped. We still like what's happening. It still feels like it's working. But at what point do we say, gosh, the pace isn't fast enough to get us to where we want to be? So at what point then do we begin to think about whether or not we're compliant? So to your point, I think there are a variety of different things that need to somehow be vetted at this table so that we all at least have the same basic understanding of all of those factors, and maybe those are good AJ questions. But again, I don't think it's fair for us not to know what it looks like and how we're defining it and how we're determining compliance, and not be able to articulate that in a way that gives the staff a level of confidence that we're going alongside each other to get the work done.
And I think a component of that is, and now that Aaron is on board, I think a component of that is putting that in writing, our beliefs and our expectations when it comes to compliance, because our interpretation can shift based on climate, environment, time, for a lot of different reasons, and it needs to be as consistent as possible for the next 2 years. And so the more that we can, and I think putting something in writing that's not necessarily binding, but that's something that we can always come back to and be very clear about, that this is what we as a board feel meets that standard. Again, gives the folks who are responding to and trying to meet this goal a little bit more certainty as they do their work.
Well, I think it's also our own accountability measure.
I'm a little bit of a visual learner, so as you were talking, I'm thinking about this scale where it's the number and we have to balance how we get there with what the number and the result actually is. So I think this is probably going to be a deeper conversation on what that balance is, but what I'm kind of hearing is, as a rough guideline, is if we're meeting the number and the method by which we got there is reasonable, that would be compliance. So there is some component of getting to the number, but also that the way in which we get there has to be reasonable. And so I think we can probably dig into that more with AJ in January. And I'm hoping that if I go to him and talk to him, he might have a guideline, outline, checklist, rubric, scale, whatever you want to call it, for how other boards maybe determine compliance, partial compliance, and non-compliance. I'm guessing some of our colleagues out there have already taken a crack at this problem, I hope. So, and maybe, if not, we'll just come up with our own thing, and then we'll, be the geniuses.
We're overachievers, so what can I say?
But I mean, I am kind of wondering if that's how we want to go, is having some sort of a grid, rubric, whatever we want to call it for ourselves, of how we get there. And maybe we model it a little bit off of how we do our self-evaluation, of you kind of have to be all in that column to have met those that level potentially. I don't know. I think that that could be up for discussion too, because I know I was trying to give us partial credit for things, and I know that they would like partial credit for things. So we should probably talk a little bit about what that might look like. So are you comfortable with that kind of framework, knowing that we'll address that more deeply in January? Do we need to do some more action sooner than that? I mean, is the
we've
board
got a motion.
comfortable? I don't know.
I don't
Got a
think,
motion,
yeah, I
so,
don't think there's more that needs to happen now, but
Okay.
we've been talking about doing this same work for a
Yeah.
long time, and it's necessary.
Yeah.
Smart goals aside, it's necessary, but Rob and Terry bring up excellent points in terms of the total context. There's going to be ebbs and flows as we pursue a monumental goal over the course of 3 or 4 years. And we're all going to need ways to assess what's this mean, because we're going to talk about budget a little bit later on in the work session, and you want to talk about the rubber meeting the road and saying, okay, the means by which we get there are a very important element of this discussion. Rob referenced it at our last meeting, so I do think it has to be a little bit more comprehensive, or a lot more comprehensive than just we set out numerical targets and we either make them or we don't, because that's way too simplified.
Yeah.
so let me just put something else out there. So I know we've got a motion on the floor right now, but I'm wondering if we could table that motion for us to really feel like the action we're taking tonight is one that's consistent with something that we've established.
I would recommend that.
Yeah,
I would support
I just feel like we're putting the cart before the horse, and I feel like if we're going to have that conversation,
Yeah.
I would prefer to do justice to this in a way that honors what we said we were going to do.
I agree, and I think also this, knowing that the board uses each of these as a piece of the superintendent's evaluation, I think we want to be incredibly clear from step one of this new process of what that looks like.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you made a formal motion to table our motion.
I made the motion, so I believe I could. There was a second to the motion, but I believe I could amend my motion, and I could move that we table this report until a meeting to be determined by our board leadership and the superintendent.
Okay.
Who was the seconder?
Ms. Anderson.
I think that was.
You
Second
agree?
that.
Okay, so we now have a motion by Mr. Barron and a second by Ms. Anderson to table this item for action to a later date to be decided between the superintendent and board leadership. Do we have any discussion on the new motion? Any questions? Okay, then I think that are we good? Okay, then I think we can move ahead and vote on our new motion. Okay, the vote is approved 7-0. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
We have a couple information-only items. The board self-evaluation 1.16, which was really just to bring to the forefront that this is the board self-evaluation process that we will go through again as a board in work session in January. This is our new self-evaluation. There will also be a component to this that I will be sending out to board members that is us evaluating ourselves on our governance policies. So that'll be the first time, so I'll make sure that we touch base on that for our new board members and have you guys have clarity around that. And then also preliminary plans for various school improvement projects and a Head Start committee meeting minutes. So next on the agenda, we have items of privilege, and I just have some very brief comments, which is I just wanted to welcome Ms. Sawyer and Mr. Cody to the board table for your first full meeting and monitoring report, and we're just going to hit the ground running here. And I also just, in this time of right after Thanksgiving, I just want to give thanks to all of our teachers, bus drivers, custodians, food service workers, everyone who works in the district, who impacts the lives of our kids every single day. I know that, you know, I am incredibly grateful. I know that our parents are, and our students are very grateful for the work that you do every single day. So thank you so much. I hope that you had a restful break and, you know, got some time with your family and spent some good time there. So I'll open it up if any other board members have any comments. If not, I'll turn it over to our superintendent for his report.
Yes, I just want to share that we were going to introduce the chief officers this evening. Our associate superintendent, Matt Smith, was in New York for a Wallace meeting yesterday and was supposed to get in last night, and weather and the state of air travel these days in combination didn't bring him back until this afternoon, and he was unable to stay for the entire meeting tonight because of taking care of some issues that were delayed because of his extended absence. And our chief operating officer went under the knife today for a hip replacement surgery. He is, as far as I know, everything went well, but I haven't gotten an update yet from Nancy, his wife. So we can introduce our CHRO and our CFO at the work session, but the other two will have to wait for another time. So also welcome, Mr. Cody. Welcome, Ms. Sawyer.
All right, without objection, the meeting's adjourned.